my father was a painter, and he said that he was Cornish, born on both sides, and he meant left and right. And well, he sort of investigated Cornwall in a sense to begin with. I've investigated him a bit, and he really, having sorted around him, left and right and all round, he then looked under, which is associated with extraction, and above. He looked down and he went into mythology, which goes into the underworld, and he looked into mining, which he had relatives who had been associated with mining. And I remember that he said that there was an Adlerian psychoanalyst who was dying to get him on the couch to analyse him, and he was always scared stiff that he would lose his ability to create. And I always thought, if you could discover a way, maybe a formula for accessing the imagination, which I have stopped calling the imagination but now call inventiveness, because it takes the dominance of the I away from the idea of this thing in our head, which gives too much dominance to the I. I think of the senses, the five senses, as dictators, and look at them as all vying with each other to control our view. So inventiveness is an important word for me, because we've been running a series of experiments. There's a man called, a clever man called Dr. Turk, Frank Turk, and he started the Cornish Biological Records Unit. And it's a very simple idea that you just collect data, sightings of flora and fauna. And as Paul and Kenna were showing, a huge contrast between the north and south coast, just a few miles. It's the contrast and the variety of Cornwall, which is quite special. It's got probably the most varied weather on Earth. Flora, fauna, rock, metal, in a small space. But also, which interests me more, is people. A huge variety of people who've been brought in from Nobel Prize winners. I mean, we've just been doing a series of experiments which extend the idea of the biological records unit, but looking about how people become inventive. What are the conditions in which inventiveness occurs, and what are the things that stop one being inventive? And one thing I've decided is that it's better to be more than one person. Cubism had the idea of looking at things from different positions. But I've got this idea that one needs to be a lot more than one person. So I invent characters who I can think with their viewpoint. And often they've got a different hierarchy of senses. This is the thing about mediums. If you do something in sculpture, it's tactile. Though the people who actually receive the information can't use the tactile. That's a dilemma with it. Then a writer is, well, if you write poetry, it's not necessarily designed to be read aloud, so it's not necessarily oral. But if you write lyrics, which I discovered, the lyric is designed to be sung, so that when you design it, it's designed for its sound effect, which poetry is often only designed for its meaning, or its rhythm. So making films is useful because one's got characters who one can push ideas through. So Jane, should we show the first one? I would re-edit this a lot shorter at the end. It's 3 minutes, which is probably 2 minutes too long. Yes, Teddy's Book of Knots. This is, Teddy doesn't speak, so it's... sort of absurd thing to do, really, but it's... it isn't really meant to be a film to be shown. It's to help me think about the process of thinking and the knots one gets into. And perhaps a better example of this kind of use of using actors and film and so on for helping thinking is when I started to think about nothing, about the concept of nothing, and where one could go with it. And I've got three people that I've used. Vera Rowley, who's a psychoanalyst in the 30s, and she has some quite different ideas than I would ever have come up with about nothing. And then I use Teddy again, because he can't speak. And then I use another character who's a sort of fairy philosopher. And that's the next one, fairy mathematics. This is a much more pedantic approach. And he talks about vagueness, but in a pedantic way. Because I keep going back to the idea that Cornwall is such a place of contrasts that thinking is useful if you think.
Really do not concern.
I need to go up a bit.
For example,
volume.
A fairy cannot get worked up
Yes.
about the difference between a foot square and a square foot.
Bit louder.
In order to grasp
Yes.
fundamental principles of Principia Mathematica, it's helpful to understand that, first of all, fairies have got many precise signs for degrees of approximation, such as roughly in the vicinity of, approaching, nearly, sort of, verging on, maybe, vaguely, almost, and thereabouts. If there is the slightest hint of exactitude, fairies will run from it about a mile. So this plethora of indeterminacy means, which of course fairies embrace, means that, for example, in fairy mathematics, 2 minus 4 is approximately in the region of 400. To operate with such degrees of approximation is, of course, unworkable for humans. But fairies build everything on completely arbitrary calculations. This means that it is virtually impossible for them to make a mistake. Ever. This is an enviable position for them to be in. So a glance at some fairy equations might enlighten us as to their methods. For example, although now and then 12 does equal 12, now and then it equals 7. Now, 0 is definitely their favorite number. For example, we multiply that by 12, it equals 0 minus 1. And 0 plus 0 equals, and now 0 divided by 0, that equals, now by placing a 0 with a kiss next to it on the left-hand side of the equation, fairies end up with another 0 on the right-hand side of the equation, and no kisses.
Okay, I've got to finish it there because of time. In the next one, basically Teddy, through meanness of chalk, he discovers 0 equals, and he can do the 0 smaller and still get away, it still means 0. And then it's even smaller, and then he runs out of board, and he's got the chalk on the edge of the board And he realizes he can still draw the naught, but not use any chalk. And then he comes around with this incredible realization that he can do nothing on nothing without using any chalk.